welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOP-LP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9 and on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube station at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and this morning I am delighted to welcome back a return visitor to the morning show. Ghlee Woodworth is here. Ghlee is a native Newburyporter, a 12th generation member of her family to live here. She's also an historian and an author, having written Tiptoe Through the Tombstones about Oak Hill Cemetery and Newburyport Clipper Heritage Trail Volumes 1 and 2. You will not find very many people, if anyone, who knows the neighborhoods, the industries, the changing populations and economies of Newburyport as well as she does. She's also become active in researching and providing public education about early Black history in Newburyport, and she's here today to talk about the fascinating Old Hill Burying Ground, once known Marker Project. Ghlee, welcome and thank you for coming back to the morning show.
Thank you, Mary, as always. Appreciate you taking the time and learning about a local history project, including the Black Heritage Trail.
Well, you know, you're always doing something fascinating, so always happy to have you here, and you always talk in such an amazing and engaging way about your projects, and I'm so glad and grateful to you that you're doing them. Well, Ghlee, you know, I know that since the spring of 2023, more than 361 participants have attended your early Black history walking tours and slideshows.
Yes.
And I was hoping you could tell us the origin story of these tours. How and why did you become interested in African American history in Newburyport, and what areas and topics do the tours cover?
Well, first I started tours local history back in 2006, and a few years later I got interested in Black history. And so I did some studying and researching, and I found grave sites of Black residents, citizens in Highland Cemetery, which is across from Old Hill Burying Ground. Now, it was common knowledge among those who liked history that there was this small section in Old Hill Burying Ground along Auburn Street where there were Blacks buried, because we had 4 stones, and we knew that they were Black citizens. And so I just did further research, and as I was writing Clipper Heritage Trail Volume 1 and Volume 2, I included some stories, especially in Volume 2, which was published in September of 2022. So during that spring, when I was doing the research and then finishing the book, took a breath and said, okay, I want to look further into some of these folks and the origins from the late 1700s. And so I went ahead and did that. And then that small area where there are only 4 stones standing and 4 stones broken, my guess was, and others, that there were probably more people buried in this small area, most likely Black citizens, African Americans.
Yeah.
And so that's when the research, and I always dreamed of, I learned many years ago about ground penetrating radar.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Yes. And the ground penetrating radar generally is used to find pipes and electrical lines and so forth. But over the past dozen years or so, there are companies helping people to do a project in cemeteries where they think there are people buried, but there are not gravestones.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And this ground penetrating radar, and so I had dreamed about it, but it was the funds. Finally, I found a company, and how I found this company, GeoSearch, was I saw it online, and they're out of Sterling, and they were helping an elementary school find their time capsule.
Oh, no
with
kidding.
Their equipment. Yes. Oh. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give this company a call. And Tom Belsky said, yes, we can help you. And he sent an estimate, and I sent it to Jordy Vining in the planning office. He's assistant senior project manager. He's involved in Black History Project Initiative. And they had some money. And they said, yes, we can help with this project.
Yeah.
So last May, Ed Belsky came with his equipment, and it kind of looks like a kind of a lawnmower with a computer up on top by the handles. And this computer, he just drives, he pushes it over the grass. And generally the computer screen will have straight lines. But when there is a disturbance, an anomaly, something there, and Ed says, okay, here we go. It's squiggly lines.
Okay.
And this marks, he says, okay, here is a burial here.
Oh.
And he says, I can't tell if there's one or two people here, but there's a burial here. And so that morning, within a couple hours, he started flagging the areas where he saw these burials, and we came up with 18 unmarked burial lots.
Wow, that's what a great story. Wow.
And I was so excited.
Absolutely. Now that would be 18 sites, but there might be more than one person.
There's possible.
It's possible.
Yes, we'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
And, for example, where Mercy Small and Franklin and Enoch are buried, slate stones, up on the hill, he did go around those stones, and he could not find any evidence that there were burials there. But because it's been so long ago that the computer could not detect a burial, but it doesn't mean they're not there.
Okay.
The stones there, they were buried there, but because it's been well over 200 years, or about 200 years, there's no evidence there.
Yeah. So another one of those things we'll never know.
We'll never
for
know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we do know for sure that there were 18 unmarked burial sites around the markers that remain.
Yes.
For the known who are buried there. Well, Ghlee, how did you get the idea then to launch the once known marker project?
Talking to Geordie, because Geordie came out, Bethany came out from the museum. Well, there's a lot of folks who were going around, and we're looking at this, and we just chatted and said, it would be great if we could mark these spots, and he agreed. And I said, well, I'll go get some estimates. Okay, so I went out and got some estimates. And we're looking for 6-inch by 6-inch by 6-inch lot markers. And normally you see them in a cemetery with initials on them.
Yeah.
So I gave him the estimate, and we weren't sure of funding. So this is where a friend, Liz Walsh, and I chatted because she had attended a couple of my presentations, slideshows. And she says, geez, we got the community here. I know they want to participate. And I've had people asking, gee, how can we participate? Can we give you some money for the project? So Liz and I came up with the idea, wrote a letter, and we pushed out a letter to friends and acquaintances and said, hey, we're trying to raise some money if you're interested. Well, within a month, we were able to raise $3,200, and that's going to take care of these markers. Now, Geordie, we communicating, and we thought, okay, unknown, because we don't know who these people are. Have maybe a few names. They could be the Ambushes, the Pickerings, the Cambridge, Francis, Lorings, and so forth, families. You don't know. But he had done some research, and he had seen the phrase once known.
Yeah.
And he said, here's once known. He explained it, and I thought, well, of course. They were once known instead of unknown. Now today they're unknown, but they were once known. So why not? So we're going to have those words, once known, on those markers.
Yeah, in fact, Maeve, could you bring up the once known, just the words, so people can see that on the screen for just a few seconds. And then after that, could you bring up the LH, which is the type of granite stone? It
Yes.
has those initials, but this will have the once known on the granite marker then. And just to give people a sense of what it's
Right.
very attractive, very
Yes.
smooth surface with the engraving of what will be once known.
Right.
And, that was one of the things I'd wanted to talk to you about because we all know about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier,
Yes,
right?
yes.
At Arlington National Cemetery in D.C. And yet, once known has a very, very different kind of meaning. Because, as you were starting to say, it's not that they were unknown in their time.
Right.
We don't know their identities, but
Right.
calling them once known, I think, is evocative. It makes you start imagining an
Yes.
actual person, and
Yes.
it makes you think about the fact that, yeah, they were alive, they were members of this community, they walked, they talked, they had lives, they did something at, for work, they had families.
Yes.
And so they almost become presences.
Yes.
Whereas unknown evokes kind of like this ghostly vast energy field.
Yes.
It's kind of impersonal.
Right.
But once known, it's more of a personal connection.
Yes, and that, well put. Well put, Mary. Yes, absolutely. And as I threw out some names, it's probably the Ambushes and the Francis and Lorings there, and maybe Cambridge is there, and maybe once enslaved apropos, he may be there. So we do have some names, possibly. The Fatals may be there. So, yes, and that, again, you explained it very well, that these people were part of our community.
Yeah.
And we already have, I talked to Geordie the other day, and we've already have a planned celebration. We do not have a date yet, but there will be a celebration.
Wonderful.
Of this in probably May or June. Reverend Rebecca has said that she will be, will be there,
wonderful.
part of
That's
the
great.
ceremony, and will hopefully all of the donors will be able to be present, and just the friends and the community members be present for this celebration.
It touches my heart to think about that because it's a way of bringing them back to life.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes. And as in my presentations and tours, it's participatory, and we're going to have everybody gather on the hill.
Wonderful.
Everybody's going to be standing next to one of those markers.
Oh, yeah.
Some words will be spoken, and then everybody will be able to place
Right.
the marker
Right.
into the ground.
And now you have some holding bricks, I think.
Yes.
Currently. So, Maeve, if you could bring up the image of the red brick. Almost looks like a little paint around
Yes,
it.
yes.
And then also, just for a few seconds, perhaps the whole site that has like the marked out squares where they'll be. So these are just holding.
Holding, yes. When we first identified them, I put green stakes in.
Okay.
But I have to have them flush because the lawnmowers are going by. But at the beginning, I said, please don't mow the grass. I just wanted it so people could see, because the story was in the paper, and I wanted people to drive by and they could see.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then eventually I lost the green markers. The lawnmowers are driving over
Well, it
them, and
happens.
it's in the grass, and I'm trying to find them, and I located them, and then I put orange paint on them, and then eventually said, Ghlee, you have got to put brick markers down there so you can find these. And so right now people can see 18 bricks with bright orange paint on them, and this is the areas of the unmarked areas.
Yeah, so anybody who's driving by there now, because I walk my dog at Bartlett Mall almost every day, and occasionally we'll wander over. Everybody driving by will now know what those orange-looking bricks and the lines are for.
Right.
And they have also seen then the really lovely granite markers that will take their place,
Right.
Later on in the spring. So, well, Ghlee, you put a lot of work into this project, and I'd be curious to find out what impact do you hope that the once known markers and just the awareness of the fact, first of all, that there was an African American section of the cemetery and that there are unmarked burials there. What impact do you hope this project and the granite stones will have on people who come to see the cemetery or drive by and notice them,
Right.
get out of their cars and wander over
Yeah.
to see what's happening there?
Well, as my tours, and my slideshows, people are, there's some maybe a little shocked because they didn't realize we have this history. They kind of know it, but now with my project in general, local history, I'm very focused on people.
Yeah.
There are events I may include, but there's always the people, because it's the people who make up the community.
It is, yeah, for sure.
Yes. And so in this case, early Black history. So they're hearing names, they're seeing gravestones, telling them stories about these people. So these markers will remind people, hey, they were in our community. They made contributions in our community. And like today, not everybody's going to be on a radio show. Not everybody's going to be in the paper or get some award or be recognized. The majority of us are going about our everyday life, but we're making contributions in the community. And they're just as important as those who might get a little bit more recognition for whatever reason. But those people are important. These people who we will have markers for, they were in our community. They were making contributions. As you said, they're living everyday life. And it's important to celebrate them and celebrate their contributions, as we should be doing every day with all the people in our community who are making contributions.
We the people is everybody. In other words. And yet, because of the way our history is constructed, often from a much more limited, you know, in the past, largely white property-owning male point of view, there are just whole swaths, gigantic swaths of we the people that have not made it into the narratives of history. And so what you're talking about is reconstituting the whole picture of who we are. Because we have always been multiple and diverse and varied. And in a way, having the unmarked stones, I think, in contrast to the marked stones, and also in contrast to the rest of the cemetery, also makes a statement about the history of race relations in this country and segregation, and that it kind of evokes that whole kind of forlorn history. Because we have to infer that poverty, just not having the resources for a burial with a marker, because it costs money. And so that's also part of we the people, the social inequity and the financial inequities of our history. That's also really important for us to hold in our minds and be aware of. And work not to leave out. That doesn't mean people weren't consequential as part of a community. It doesn't mean they're not part of the whole history of our community, our state, our nation, that combined to leave it to create potentials for us. And so I'm just so pleased that you are doing this project, because it has a ripple effect. It communicates at a lot of different, it's layered. You know, it communicates a lot, some of which we can articulate, some of which is emotional. Because when I read about this project, it was emotional. I thought, oh, what a wonderful thing to do. And it does, I'm touching my heart because that's where I feel it. You know, those lost connections, I think we really miss out when parts of our history, the people that are part of our community, when they're left out, we miss the opportunity to have relationships. Even if the kind of relationship you have through history. But those stories combine to make us what we are. So I think it enriches all of us. So anyway, going on. But
no, I love you know, again, well said, in that I just love, and people who love history, we all have our thing, but when we get a story and to be able to share, I love this. And they weren't recognized for many years. Now, Dr. Carrie Poirier in the 90s, and Jane Yulsika and Rosemary Green, they created walking maps, Black Heritage Trail, and that's what I'm working on now, are the brochures to update. But there's so many stories. So, but now is, and it's common in many communities, that we're bringing out stories of the past, and in this case, our African American neighbors and citizens. And we're role models for the community within Newburyport with this project, but we're also role models for the rest of Massachusetts or for New England with the panels with Jody Vining and Sid Usky and Dr. Kabir Baumgartner, role models for the rest of Essex County and Massachusetts and New England. So as you mentioned, the ripple effect. Well, hey, look what Newburyport's doing. Geez, maybe we can do a little digging in our history and come up with a few names.
Well, and at this point, Maeve, could you put up the first page of Ghlee's brochure, the one with the map on it? Because it's very exciting that you've gotten these brochures, but what's interesting to me, just when I first saw that map, is that sometimes, Newburyport today is not as diverse as it could be, hopefully not as diverse as it will be, but one of the visual learnings from looking at the map is, there are sites all over Newburyport, from the north end to the south end and beyond. And that is a teaching point all by itself.
Absolutely.
So, and then Maeve, could you bring up the front of the brochure as well, just so people can see what's in the offing and will be available soon. And Ghlee, could you just talk a little bit about the work that went into these brochures and anything you'd like to say, in fact, about that very point, that there are points and people to talk about in those stories all around Newburyport.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, Carrie and Jane and Rosemary, they did this in the past, and getting through my Volume 1 and then Volume 2, I walked in and I thought, geez, I walked into the Museum of Old Newbury and said to the director, Bethany Rofter, I said, hey, you know what? I think we need to update the Black Heritage Trail, what Jane and Rosemary did. She says, okay. I said, all right, sounds good. I'll go find some funding.
Well, that's what you want to hear.
I'll do that. So I went and found some funding. And we had talked again, and Kristen also. And we said, okay, one city brochure. As I said, one city brochure. And then Bethany said, well, Ghlee, you're the only person who knows where these people are buried. And I said, good point. So we're going to have a walking map of the cemeteries, Old Hill and Highland Cemetery. And there's also a Black citizen at St. Paul's. So, and then 7 or 8 months later, back in September, I walked in and I said, look, there is too much information. We need 2 city maps. I said, okay. And then I went back a couple weeks later and said, you know what, I always get questions on abolitionists and the Underground Railroad. So we got to have a 4th brochure. And she said, okay, Ghlee. And that's what it is. There's just so many stories. But hopefully the brochures, this first one is Soldiers, Sailors in Guinea Village. Hopefully to get some highlights of the people. And I said to Liz yesterday, I've got the text for the brochure 2, and Fortitude, Fellowship, and Entrepreneurs, and I said, I'm trying to mention as many names as possible. And because there were a lot of stories here, and so it's just the recognition and the celebration of our people, from the enslaved, apropos, and Joel, to owners of barbershops and restaurants and other businesses. So that's the mission of these brochures, and to get them out to people in a user-friendly way.
Absolutely, as we were saying before, people do love a nice brochure. I think, because it's like first of all, it's visual, and the visual, I think the map itself, as I said, sort of tells a story that these lives are being lived all around Newburyport. And I like the fact that the brochures have themes that feature things like entrepreneurship, and there was there were active African American communities. It wasn't all the history of slavery is the one that people think of more,
Right.
but there were free blacks living their lives, being
Yes.
barbers, being,
Yes.
living these lives. And so it's very exciting that you've done all this work, and thank you for that. So-
I enjoy it, and I love it, and it makes me happy. And the bottom line is I like to learn, and I like to share what I learn.
Yes.
So I always try to get what I learn out to people in a variety of ways, so they can enjoy it.
And may I say, having attended some of your talks in the past, you do it in such an engaging way. You have a way of making history come alive,
Oh, thank
which
you.
is what history should be for, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's not the study of dead people, it's the study of people who are our ancestors, people who created a legacy, people who combined to create the world that we inhabit. And so it should come alive, and you do a beautiful job of that.
Thank you.
Any kind of timeline about when the brochures, I mean, this first one, you have a...
Yes. I'm hoping I'll be talking to Bethany, the director of the Museum of Old Newbury, and hope by the end of January we will
That's
have
soon,
two.
great.
Yes, soon.
Wonderful.
2 of the brochures ready to announce,
Wonderful.
and we will be pushing those brochures out, PDFs out to all kinds of institutions all over. In the region, Massachusetts and New England, to all the schools, so they will be able
great.
to use the charter school, all the local schools,
Right.
surrounding schools, other museums, and then to people, push it out to people, and then they can share it with friends and family and social media and so forth as a PDF. And then if they would like to get it printed, we'll probably have copies at a few the museums here and the library here in Newburyport, but then they also can shoot it over to some of the printing places,
Sure.
the local printing places,
Sure,
and they
absolutely.
can print it out. So,
Absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's so exciting, and presumably you'll continue to do the walks.
Oh,
so
yeah.
people want the expert commentary.
Yeah, yes.
And so, how can people find out about walks? I think you mentioned, if you were talking before the show, you have a couple of evening or nighttime walks coming up.
Yes, usually, yes, the Museum of Old Newbury. Check on their website
Okay.
because there was so big a overflow for December 21st, the solstice walk at Oak Hill Cemetery.
yeah.
It's a flashlight walk. Bring your flashlights.
okay.
And there was so many people who wanted to go on the walk. We added a walk on the 20th.
Okay.
And,
Slightly pre-solstice.
Yes, pre-solstice, right, because there was so many people. And it's just fun to get out in a graveyard at Oak Hill at night with a flashlight.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
and then you'll hear a few stories about some of the people who call Oak Hill as their final resting place.
Wonderful. So it sounds as though a good resource for people who want to learn more about, get that copy of the brochures once they're available, and learn about upcoming walks that you're doing would be the website for the Museum of Old Newbury.
Yes, and then because summertime, Yankee Homecoming,
Oh, yeah.
I usually do a few walks during Yankee Homecoming. I've had walks at the Unitarian Church auction, and so I've been doing some walks, tours for those
Wonderful.
for the auction. So, yes, and contact me anytime, and I do walks.
And how can people contact you, Ghlee, if you're...
The old-fashioned phone book.
Okay.
Okay, if anybody has
Fair
those.
enough.
And then there's the modern Google.
You bet.
Yes.
Right. Because you do have a Clipper Heritage Trail website.
Yes, yes.
And also those are tremendous resources, Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Yes.
And often organized by neighborhood, and so much rich history in those
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And there's always Tiptoe Through the Tombstones
Yes,
for
there
people
is.
who want to learn more about Oak Hill Cemetery. Well, Ghlee, I can't thank you enough for all the work that you've done. Before we end today, though, just a little kind of hint of what might be forthcoming, because we were talking about, excluded populations and how important it is to now bring this attention to early Black history. But you were giving me hints that there might be forthcoming other missing populations.
Yes.
Would you mind saying a few things about your life for the next 5 or 10 years.
Well, I thought about, the brochure, and that it's such a neat vehicle to get out to people.
Yeah.
And the chamber uses those brochures, the Clipper Heritage Trails brochures. They'll be handing out these brochures to visitors. But I'm thinking, okay, what are the other populations that we could do? Well, certainly women. Now, I've written about a lot of women, but that could be put into a brochure, such a user-friendly. Maybe sea captains. So you have the women, you have sea captains. We can talk about other late immigrant populations, such as the Greek population. There's the Armenian population. So there's, we could do inventors, we could do business owners. There's just so much that can be put into a brochure. And so that's in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see some of those for sure, which will be really just truly wonderful. I mean, one of the wonderful things about Newburyport is it's the history of Newburyport, the known part, much less the unknown part, goes back to the 1600s, of course, the early 1600s. And so there's no scarcity of populations, some of which have been recorded and remembered. But there have been a lot of people here of all kinds of different groups, as you were just citing, since, over the last 400 years or so.
Yes.
So your work is endless.
Yes, it is. And
You'll never be bored.
No, not at all. And there's indigenous folks, and Christine Malpica, she's our local specialist on those populations.
Yeah.
So it's never ending. It's never ending.
And we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ghlee.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your coming to the morning show today, in particular to talk about the Once Known Marker Project, which I think is just brilliant and wonderful. And for all the work you've done and all the writing and the research that you've done, you are a resource to be cherished by Newburyport.
Thank you.
I appreciate your taking time to visit the morning show. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. Till then, be well.